You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another game review of sorts. This is sort of just going to be a loose video where I'm just kind of talking in general about comparing the two franchises. As you can tell by the title, I'll be talking about Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. I don't really know if this video will be part of any one particular series of mine, I'm honestly not sure. Now, obviously, if you've been watching my YouTube channel for a while, then you know that Fallout 3 is my favorite game of all time, and this is a fairly recent development. But I have done a ton of streams of Fallout 3, and I've actually done a decent amount of streams on Fallout New Vegas as well now. Still not anywhere near as many as I have with 3, but I've done quite a lot with New Vegas as well now too, and I'm actually currently running 2 playthroughs on New Vegas, one that is a Rumble exclusive, simply due to the fact that I didn't want to have to keep switching back and forth between having to record my streams and then re-upload them later, so I'm not going to stream the one that I'm doing on YouTube until I'm back on YouTube. And this way, Rumble gets their own exclusive version, although I did record one of the I did record one part of the YouTube run as well. Regardless, I've also played quite a bit of Fallout 4. I've done a couple of streams of Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. I've done 2 streams of Fallout 1. And so far, that is it. I do plan on trying to play all of the Fallout games in the future. As you know, I have Windows 7, so I won't have access to Steam after this year unless I upgrade, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm very stubborn. But I do have discs versions of Fallout 1, 2, and 3 on PC as well. Now, I've always been a console gamer. You guys know this if you've been watching me for a while. I tend to prefer console because of the convenience and the fact that games still get physical copies, typically. There's obviously been less and less focus on that with modern consoles, just like with PC. But regardless, that's a whole other tangent, so let's just get back to focusing on the topic of the video. So we'll start with Elder Scrolls, because that's the one that I was introduced to first, and that's the one that I was initially more into when I was younger. Obviously, my opinions have somewhat changed over time, but let's just get into Elder Scrolls. So when we're talking about Elder Scrolls for this portion of the video, one thing I will mention is there's quite a few Elder Scrolls games that I have not played. I have not played Elder Scrolls Arena, I have not played Daggerfall, I have not played Battlespire, I have not played Redguard, I have not played any of the mobile Elder Scrolls games, being Shadowkey, Stormhold, and Oblivion Mobile. I have played Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, and then a tiny bit of Elder Scrolls Online. Now, the Elder Scrolls is originally a Bethesda game, which is actually different than Fallout, because Fallout was started by Black Isle Studios, which would later branch off into Obsidian, but was bought out by Bethesda. It also had Interplay involved. Like I said, Fallout was not a Bethesda creation, but Elder Scrolls was. Now, unlike Fallout, the Elder Scrolls has always had a first-person view, except for, with some of the spin-offs where it's been a third-person view. For instance, in Redguard, it's a third-person view adventure game. I don't even think it's an RPG. Whereas the first 2 Fallouts had an isometric view, but we'll get into those a little bit more later. My introduction to Elder Scrolls was when Kyler borrowed a copy of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind from a classmate at school. Wouldn't really call her a friend of his, but he was on okay terms with her and she let him borrow it. I think she thought of him as a friend, but he didn't think of her as a friend. Again, this was many years ago. At the time, the copy was only a regular copy of Morrowind, so not the Game of the Year edition, so therefore it did not have access to the DLC. And the post-Game of the Year patches were not in, so there wasn't health bars for enemies. You could drop your gold, and a few other tweaks here that were later patched out in the Game of the Year edition. In the pre-Game of the Year edition, you could also get your bounty removed for free by just dropping all your gold and then talking to the Thieves Guild, but as I said, they did patch it out. Obviously, I would get really into the game. I didn't really beat it, and I still technically haven't beat it, but I'm currently the furthest I've ever been in the game because I've been doing the main quest on my channel on streams on YouTube. I'm actually very close to the end of the game, and I've also done quite a lot of side quests as well. Something that sets Morrowind apart from Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Skyrim is it's not fully voiced. So you actually have to read the dialogue on the screen with your eyes, which allowed it to actually have a lot more dialogue, and it gives me some fun doing little voices and things when I'm doing streams. There are some characters that are fully voiced. Dagoth-Ur is almost entirely fully voiced, and the guy who gives you the introduction when you're first getting off the boat at the beginning of the game is fully voiced, as is Jub, your boatmate, I guess, roommate on the boat. I would later go on to play Oblivion. We actually got it several years after it came out, because I found out about Oblivion when I was in middle school. I was talking to someone on the school bus about Morrowind and saying how much I loved it, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. And he said, oh, I've never played Morrowind, but I have played Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. I'm like, wait, there's a fourth one? And so then, of course, we would later get Oblivion. Now, when we initially bought it, we got the Game of the Year edition, so the one that just came with the disc, and we installed it that way. We didn't have Xbox Live yet. We had the game on 360, but we did not have Xbox Live. And naturally, as with Morrowind, I love Oblivion. I have still never beat the main quest to Oblivion either. However, I have completed almost all of the faction quests. The only one I haven't is the Thieves Guild, because I always get fucked over in the end. Either it's because of a glitch with fencing, or because I leave the area and fuck up and make it undoable. I have recently done all of the Shivering Isles on my stream, and by recently I think it was a year or two ago. And I remember when we were younger I did get fairly far in Knights of the Nine, but obviously I don't have access to that save file because it's on an Xbox that red-ringed. Unlike Morrowind, Oblivion would be fully voiced, but it would remove some of the role-playing elements to an extent, and that has been a theme with every subsequent Elder Scrolls game, as well as with Fallout games. With Elder Scrolls, it's a little bit more night and day earlier on, but Fallout 4 is a massive departure from 3 in New Vegas, but we'll get to that again when we start talking about Fallout. Oblivion was still a really fun game, and I loved doing the factions quests as well. Like I said, Thieves Guild, never finished. I don't think I've done the whole Mages Guild either, but I've done a good chunk of it. But I've always finished out the Fighters Guild, and the Dark Brotherhood. I also tend to do a lot of side quests. Then came Skyrim, which was the first one that I would pre-order and get when it came out. I played a lot of Skyrim, but initially I wasn't super into it. The first time I played Skyrim, it was so different, and having to climb all the mountains and stuff got really annoying. Then when I realized that there were pathways that you would follow to not have to climb the fucking mountains and actually have a better time doing it, I would go and do that. It's kind of like how you have to follow the roads in New Vegas. It's very similar, in fact, where you can't climb certain mountains. Skyrim would, however, remove a lot of the role-playing aspects. No longer were there classes that you would have to pick. No longer would you have to worry about your major versus minor skills, you would just level up skills. And that brings me to a thing with Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls you don't level up with XP like you do with a standard RPG, or indeed even with Fallout. With Elder Scrolls, you level up by using your skills, and your skills, as they increase, your major skills will level you up in Morrowind. In Oblivion, your major skills will level you up as well, as will your minor skills to a lesser extent. In Skyrim, like I said, you just have skills. There is no major or minor skills, just level you up. The more you use a weapon, the more you cast a spell, the more you pick a lock, the more that number's going to increase. And if that number's a major skill in Morrowind, it's going to bump it up. If it's a major or minor skill in Oblivion, it's going to bump it up. And enough of that, you will get a level up. Miscellaneous skills in Oblivion and Morrowind will not level you up at all. But in Skyrim, again, the skill system just lets you level up with any skills. There are choices in the Elder Scrolls games when it comes to talking and things like that, but in all honesty, it's a lot more limited. We'll talk more about the speech system in Fallout later, but I will say this, Fallout absolutely has the better speech system. In the Elder Scrolls games, you're typically going to have a few different choices to try and persuade people. Most of the time they suck balls, so you're just going to end up bribing them, because that's really the only surefire way to actually do it. With the Elder Scrolls games, each character has a disposition towards you, and that will determine whether they're willing to help you or not, or talk to you or not, things like that. There's not really that so much with Fallout, so I guess that is one thing that makes the speech system in Elder Scrolls unique. Although there is a companion relationship system in Fallout 4, but that's a little different. Elder Scrolls is obviously a fantasy setting, whereas Fallout is a sci-fi, post-apocalyptic setting, so obviously there's a bit of a difference there. With Elder Scrolls, I typically focus on melee weapons, and I typically build a melee build for my characters. I don't really use ranged weapons, like, at all, and I don't really use magic at all. Like, there are instances where I will use either of those things, but it's very rare and few and far between. Which is why I think it's interesting that so many people say with Skyrim that everybody always ends up being a stealth archer, which I never fucking do. I always just dual-wield swords. Out of the 3 Elder Scrolls games that I've primarily played, they get easier with each game. Morrowind is a lot more difficult and doesn't hold your hand. It's also the most immersive, because it doesn't have any fast travel other than certain fast travel points that will take you to specific locations, as well as there are teleportation spells you can get. Apparently Daggerfall did have fast travel, but Morrowind removed it, but I honestly think that was for the better as far as the immersion of the game. Morrowind also has your hit rate be based on your skill with a weapon. So if you're swinging a sword around that you have no skill with, you're going to hit the enemy very rarely. Also, the higher an enemy's agility and luck, the more likely they are to dodge. You also want to make sure your agility is good, which is a mistake that I have made in Morrowind in my most recent playthrough. In the Elder Scrolls games, you get to be a vampire or a werewolf. Depending on some of the games, you can be one or the other. You can't ever be both at the same time. Oblivion does not have the option for werewolves, but Morrowind and Skyrim do both have vampires and werewolves, whereas Oblivion just has vampires. Talking of the factions in the Elder Scrolls games, in most Elder Scrolls games, there's the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, and the Thieves Guild. In Oblivion and Skyrim, you can also join the Dark Brotherhood. The Dark Brotherhood does exist in Morrowind if you have the Game of the Year edition. However, they are a hostile faction that tries to eliminate you. I think when it comes to factions overall, I think Elder Scrolls factions are, for me, still more iconic, although the factions in the Fallout games are also really great. But I think the Dark Brotherhood, the Thieves Guild, the Fighters Guild, to a lesser extent the Mages Guild, have all been really memorable for me. I like all of their quest lines. I've always had fun playing and replaying them. Like I said, Fallout does have good factions, but I do think that Elder Scrolls has it beat in this one area, which is good because we're going to get to the ways that Fallout beats it as when we start talking about Fallout. Unfortunately, with the Elder Scrolls games, they don't really have much in way of in the sense of multiple endings. The main quest always has the same ending in the Elder Scrolls. It's just a fact. It's just how it is. So unfortunately, it doesn't do too well on that front either. You can be evil in the Elder Scrolls. You can kill basically anyone. In fact, in Morrowind, you can kill literally anyone because there are no characters that are marked as essential, which, having quest essential characters marked as essential became the norm in later Elder Scrolls and in Fallout games. But Morrowind will let you literally kill anyone, and if you kill someone who is essential to the quest, it'll just give you a message that lets you know that you fucked up and killed someone who is essential to the quest. I think the dialogue options are a little bit more fleshed out and better in Morrowind too, because in Oblivion and Skyrim, it doesn't really tell you what you're saying, it just tells you the topic. Whereas in Morrowind, you actually see what you're saying when you're responding to someone. Like I said, the speech system in Elder Scrolls is not the best. I think Morrowind has it better than Oblivion and Skyrim, though. Which, obviously, Morrowind is my favorite Elder Scrolls game, so I am biased in favor of it, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm not. Skyrim, I have beat the main quest. It's the only Elder Scrolls that I've beat the main quest, and it was really fun to beat. Like I said, they severely toned down the role-playing elements, made it really fucking easy, but it was still fun, and I still had a lot of fun playing it, and I still like the world and the lore. Interestingly, with some of the factions in Skyrim, they replaced the Fighters Guild with a guild known as the Companions, which sort of fills that role, although it's also the Werewolf Guild, so it's a little different. Instead of the Mages Guild, you have the College of Winterhold, which effectively just fills the same role as the Mages Guild, although you don't actually have to really use all that much magic to do that questline for some reason. It's really fucking weird that you can be the leader of a Mages College without having really used any spells. You use, like, 2 spells throughout the entire of the game, and you're still good. That's another thing, is Oblivion and Skyrim let you be in every faction and do them all on a single save file. Morrowind will have the factions be at odds with each other, so you can't. For instance, if you do the Thieves Guild questline and the Fighters Guild questline in Morrowind, you'll eventually have to pick between the two, because the two are at odds with each other. But we've rambled about Elder Scrolls for a bit. Let's start talking about Fallout. So Fallout I got into with Fallout 3. I didn't really get, like, super addicted to it until the last couple of years. In fact, the last year, I think. When Corbin convinced me to finally finish my playthrough of Fallout 3. We got Fallout 3 when it came out, because we were into Elder Scrolls, obviously. And when we got it, I remember we played through the Vault. I played through the Vault 101 section of the game so many times when I was younger. I did up to Tranquility Lane. I think that's as far as I ever got in the main quest when I was younger. Obviously now I have replayed through it multiple times. New Vegas I had very little exposure to when I was younger. I played a few little bits here and there, but it was on the PC version, and I mainly just messed around changing characters' sexes or using the kill command. Like, I didn't really play it a whole hell of a lot, I just fucked around. Which is true with, you know, like Morrowind. Like I said, with Morrowind, when we first played it, I just fucked around, but I've actually been taking it seriously. Same is true with Fallout, obviously. Like I said, with New Vegas, I'm currently running 2 playthroughs, and I've already done 3 out of the 4 endings. I'm going to do the NCR ending once I get back on YouTube. and I'm currently working on an objectivist run where I'm siding with Mr. House and trying to make choices like an objectivist, but that is in fact Rumble exclusive. When Corbin convinced me to get into Fallout 3, eventually when I started to get better at the game, I had a blast, and it quickly became my favorite game, and I've replayed through it a ridiculous amount of times. I've gotten every single achievement in Fallout 3, and I've gotten a decent amount of achievements in New Vegas, nowhere near all of them, and I probably will never get all of them just because some of them require weapons DLCs. With Fallout 4, I remember I played the introduction to it when it first came out, but that was about it. I've since done a full playthrough of Fallout 4's main quest. I'm actually planning a review of Fallout 4. I will be doing that review more in depth. I will probably brush on some of the issues with Fallout 4 as we go in this video. But once I finish all the DLC for Fallout 4, that is when I will do my full review, because I want to do all the DLC just like I did with 3 in New Vegas, just to give it a fair shake, like I did with those two. But the Fallout games opt for a more traditional XP system, where you get skills through experience points. Then you have the level up system, obviously, which in most of the games gives you skills and perks. In Fallout 3, you get a perk every level. In Fallout New Vegas, you get a perk every other level. In Fallout 1 and 2, you get a perk every 3 levels. In Fallout 4, perks replace the skill system and make it all just a skill system, and it actually works kind of similarly to Skyrim's skill system, with one major exception that I think is actually a fatal flaw, that it shouldn't go like that. So essentially, they took the skill progression from Skyrim, but made it so that you don't actually get the skills. You still go with an XP system, so it just doesn't mesh well together. It doesn't make any sense, because you only get one perk per level, but the reason that was fine in Skyrim is because your skills were still leveling up, and then you would get enhancements of those skills. Like, you would get skills whenever you used an item. Not so much in Fallout 4. Instead, in Fallout 4, you just get experience. So it's a little ridiculous that they would kind of try to take the Skyrim sort of perk chart and put it into Fallout when they fundamentally function differently, so it really doesn't work to have one perk per level with no skills. It's very odd that that's the focus they went with. They also give you less special points. I really don't like the level up system in Fallout 4. We'll get to that more when I do a proper review of Fallout 4. But Fallout 3 and New Vegas, I love the skill systems in them. I think they both work really well. The dialogue system in 3 and New Vegas, I think, are the two best dialogue systems. I think is the best dialogue system in any RPGs I've played, because they're effectively the same. New Vegas adds a few cool little tweaks that weren't in 3 with the dialogue, and there's a little bit of a difference with the way the speech skill checks work. But overall, they're basically the same dialogue system, where you have a list of choices to say what you want in response to what people say to you. Some of them are dependent on your skills, some of them aren't. It really just depends. So, love the speech system. I think Fallout easily wins with the speech system if we're talking about 3 in New Vegas. Fallout 4's speech system isn't terrible, but it replaces the list of choices with a dialogue wheel with only 4 options. It essentially works kind of like a Telltale game, where it's just you have A, B, X, and Y, and then you push 1 to make your choice. Doesn't really fit with an RPG. They were trying to be more experimental, and I think the reason they narrowed it down so much was so that your character could be fully voiced, because in Fallout 4, your character is in fact fully voiced. I've come to love the post-apocalypse setting of the Fallout games more than the fantasy setting of Elder Scrolls. I have always been probably more into sci-fi than fantasy, but with Elder Scrolls and Fallout, I initially was more into the Elder Scrolls universe. But having played so much Fallout, I love the Fallout universe. It's my favorite video game universe. It's really cool. I love the lore. I love the universe. I love it. Though I did say that the factions, I do think, are slightly better in the Elder Scrolls games, Fallout does not, by any means, have a lack of factions. In fact, the factions are amazing in Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 4 in particular. Well, when I say in Fallout 4, really it's just the Brotherhood of Steel I like. The Minutemen, I really like what they stand for, but their quest line is fucking boring. The Railroad is awful, and the Institute, I never really got that into either. I don't really like the Institute all that much either. But I love the Brotherhood of Steel. Loved them. It's my favorite version of the Brotherhood of Steel, which might be a hot take, but I love them. Fallout New Vegas, I think, overall has the best factions out of the Fallout games, because all 4 of the main factions are really cool in their own right and have their own motivations that are interesting. In addition to that, New Vegas also has like a ton of side factions that are all also really interesting. So that said, I think that the factions are really good in those games. I still think that the Elder Scrolls faction system and the way their quest lines work is just a little bit better. but I think Fallout's factions are still great. Unlike Elder Scrolls, with Fallout I almost never do a melee build for my characters. I typically stick to guns and energy weapons, so basically everything I do in Fallout is ranged with a few exceptions. I do really like the Auto Axe, the Ripper, and the Shish Kebab. Those are all really good melee weapons that I do use. I found that I used to be really bad at stockpiling ammo to actually be able to go into a fight and be good. But as I've gotten more experienced with the game and gotten better at it, I'm much better at getting ammo, conserving ammo, and actually stocking up. That's just something I had to readjust with, because obviously in Elder Scrolls I never did that, but in Fallout I always use ranged, so I'm always making sure that I'm well stocked on ammo now. And I think that's part of why I used to be so bad at the game, is I would just constantly run out of ammo, or I would try to use melee weapons, which I didn't have the adequate skill for. Or I would try to take on far too many enemies with a melee weapon, which is just a terrible idea to do in a Fallout game. Now, in addition to that, I have played a little bit of Fallout 1 and Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Fallout 1 I really like, but it can be really fucking frustrating. The time limit that you have makes it so stressful, because you have to find the water chip within, I think it's 150 days. I think it's like 4 months you have. And the time passes like a lot when you travel between towns, so it gets really nerve-wracking and frustrating. It also doesn't hold your hand at all with where to go. The combat's much more difficult. It's more of a traditional RPG than it is than the other Fallouts, or than the later Fallouts. Although I will say, it has its own very unique combat system too. That is, Fallout 1 and 2's combat system is so uniquely different to them that I think it's very much its own thing with the way it works. It is turn-based, but it also has movement and stuff like that. It has action points, and it does have some hallmarks that would later be implemented into later Fallout games, albeit in slightly different ways. For instance, VATS sort of made up for the fact that you're in a 3D sandbox in later Fallout games. Some people will sometimes say that the Elder Scrolls has a better aesthetic than the Fallout games, because, you know, Fallout has very muted colors in some cases. I think that they're wrong on that. I think that the muted colors fit the post-apocalyptic setting and aesthetic and add to the atmosphere. I actually think Fallout 4 was far too colorful and beautiful looking, which is why I have mods installed to make it look more like the older Fallout games. Particularly, there's a mod called Moribund World that makes the atmosphere and environment more like Fallout 1 and 2. That's obviously not to say that I dislike the Elder Scrolls aesthetic, because I do really like the aesthetic in Elder Scrolls as well, especially Morrowind. I love the way that Morrowind looks and plays. That's the thing, is Morrowind has a lot more interesting stuff with creatures and lighting and locations, whereas the later Elder Scrolls games get to be like generic fantasy and have like real animals in it. Fallout has a really good set of creatures too. They're all mutated versions of real animals, and there's even some ones based on cryptids that I think is kind of cool. Even though those come from Fallout 76, which is a terrible game. I haven't played it, but I know it's a terrible game, because, I mean, everybody knows it's a terrible game. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is a very frustrating and repetitive game, but it does have its fun moments, and I do have some fun playing it. It's basically just Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but Fallout. Like, it's literally developed by the same people and programmed in the same way. Like, it's literally part of that series. It's just the Fallout version of it. In the same way that Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise is a Yakuza game. Like, it's the exact same type of gameplay. But yeah, overall, I do prefer the Fallout games. Like I said, I like the atmosphere better. I like the stories better. I like the world better. I like the speech system better. The Elder Scrolls, I do think, does do factions better. And I do like the uniqueness of the skill system rather than an XP system. I think that the characters and locations are super memorable in both franchises, and I think they're both really great RPG series, and I love them both. Elder Scrolls Online I never really got into. Fallout 76 I'm going to play because it's on Game Pass. I otherwise would not play it, because obviously I wouldn't, like, buy that game just on its own, but since I pay for Game Pass, which, you know, is something I never thought I would do as a tangent. But it is pretty convenient, because it gives me Xbox Live in addition to letting me play a bunch of games. I still don't like it, because I think that eventually they're going to shift to only having that be the way to get games, like you couldn't buy them anymore. But I'm probably being paranoid, too, to an extent. We'll see. Because obviously games do still get removed from Game Pass. As these game series went on, things got added in, like, mini-games, right? Like, because in, like, Morrowind, when you pick a lock, you just use the lockpick, and it's just based completely on your skill, and it does, like, a dice roll to determine whether you succeeded or failed. Whereas in Oblivion and Skyrim, they introduced an actual, like, lockpicking minigame. In Oblivion's, it's one where you push the pins up. In Skyrim, they literally just copied the Fallout version that you have in Fallout 3 and up. Because Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4 all have the same lockpicking system, effectively, that would later also get put into Skyrim. So I think it's a little interesting that the Skyrim system literally just used the Fallout system, whereas they already had a pretty good lockpicking minigame in Oblivion. And also, in Morrowind, I do like that it was just based on your skill. You didn't have to clear a minigame. If you had the skill for it, you just did it, and then it was randomly generated based on your skill. My favorite sword to use in the Elder Scrolls games is Umbra. It's in Morrowind and Oblivion. You can get it in Skyrim if you buy a paid-for mod from the Creation Club, which fuck that. I like just having Umbra in the game. It's fucking gay that it's not in the game by default, because Umbra is such an iconic sword. Even though it started in Morrowind and is only in 2 games in the base game, it's still like my favorite sword to use in those games. I'm also planning to do videos for my top 10 favorite perks in the Fallout series, as well as my top 10 favorite weapons in Fallout 3. Once I finish doing 4 and do my review of it, once I finish all the DLC in 4, I'll probably redo my videos of tier lists ranking the Fallout stuff. We'll see. Obviously, I have a lot of stuff I plan to do, you know, as long as, and hopefully I'll be able to keep going on YouTube. Obviously, that was really fucking frustrating that they rejected my appeal on that old Halo stream. But anyway, this video has been really rambly. Like I said, I didn't really expect it to be super focused. I thought about doing just, like, direct comparisons to gameplay portions, but I did do that a little bit. Like I said, with, you know, the factions and the, skill systems and stuff like that. Really, at the end of the day, these are my 2 favorite RPG franchises, and then Knights of the Old Republic is also up there, although Knights of the Old Republic only has 2 games. I mean, there is the Old Republic, but I didn't really have a lot of interest in playing that. I think that the speech skill works similarly to the Persuade skill in KOTOR in New Vegas. Because in New Vegas, instead of having any element of chance, it's just if your skill is high enough, you can clear it. If it's not, you can't. Which, like I said in my New Vegas review, I could see arguments being made both ways as to which speech skill system is preferable. I like having a little bit of chance to do it with a low skill, but it is also frustrating when you have a maxed out skill and it's still only a chance. So again, there are drawbacks to both systems. Anyway, I've rambled on a lot. I'm running out of things to say. This video was very loose and unfocused. I hope you got something out of it. Have a good one. Toodles.